I'm Edward Warfield. I'm the publisher of citybiz, and I'm honored today to interview Erik Rind, who's the CEO and founder of ImagineBC. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Can you provide an introduction to ImagineBC?
Sure. It's a little bit of a journey. When we started ImagineBC three years ago, I'm not sure we really knew what ImagineBC was, but really it took about 2.5 years. About 6 months ago, we became pretty clear on what we wanted to be. And that is a revolutionary digital media platform that is member funded, but not funded through their credit card, but funded through their personal data. So we find ways to make individuals money from the use of their personal data, and then we hope that they choose to use some of that money to purchase content from our platform to support our content partners. They can also choose to donate that money to social causes, or they can put it in their bank account and buy something out there in the physical world.
And so what do you mean by the individual taking control of their data?
So I like to do this one through a story. So when my dad, if you know the show Mad Men, right, that famous show on AMC, my dad was actually a Madison Avenue executive back at exactly that time. And he actually was a media buyer. He decided where's the best place to place an ad on billboards, television, radio. Those were the mediums back then. And the best data he had available back then was a Nielsen box. So you had these, like 1,000 families had a box on the television in their home and it recorded what they were watching, and that got their way to the advertisers, and the advertisers made decisions on where to spend their money from that. Today, think about all of us being Nielsen boxes. We do nothing but spur out data about ourselves, what we're searching on webs, but even more than that, with the advent of 5G technology, companies will be able to trace everything we do. And here it's, think of the Sting song, every breath you take and every move you make, I'll be watching you. Well, big tech will be. And they're going to turn that into money. What we mean is it shouldn't be Google and Facebook making that money. It should be the people making that money, and that's what taking back control. And we're very much in the data privacy world, believe in it wholeheartedly, but that's going to require government cooperation, and it's not going to happen anytime in the near future. But people have control over what they want to do, and they should get control of their data, and they should share equitably in the money that data generates.
So your career was in human capital management and technology. You had a couple of companies. You had a company called PowerPay Software, which you sold. Tell us a little about your career and some of the highlights. And I guess any entrepreneur has a few low points, so you can share the high points and the low points.
I've had both. I've had both. I got into human capital management when I started out of school working for Pricewaterhouse's consulting group. So I'm not an accountant. I'm a technologist, but I went to work for their consulting group. I got put into its practice unit that specialized in HR payroll. We happened to be working on two very large projects for the government at the time, one for the Army, paying civilians working for the Army, the other paying for civilians working for the Navy. So I became very knowledgeable in that world, decided that there was a better way to automate payroll, went out on my own, became an entrepreneur after leaving Pricewaterhouse after 8 years. Built an HR payroll system along the concepts that I had learned while at Pricewaterhouse, and that's the market I was in for nearly 28 years of my career. Not the most exciting thing in the world. It's pretty ensconced. It's owned by three giants, ADP, Paychex, and Ceridian. Well, probably not Ceridian, probably UKG these days. But it's really hard for a boutique technology payroll company to break into the market. We did okay. We were profitable. And I sold it once for $22 million, had two downers, two bankruptcies, and then in those three iterations, I was never in charge. The fourth one, which is I'm in charge, the company's still operational. In fact, it's that parent company that funds ImagineBC. We use the profits from that company to fund ImagineBC.
So you have a vision of the future that incorporates universal data income. Can you explain what that means? Is it realistic to be with?
Well, I hope it is. I hope it is. Let me tell you what I don't believe is realistic. I don't believe universal basic income is realistic. So when you hear the politicians, and the left, And I should say my politics are moderate left these days. Used to be moderate right, now moderate left. But you hear the left talk about universal basic income when technology starts to displace jobs, that people will need UBI. And I don't know. I keep thinking about that. I'm wondering, well, if the jobs are going away and the government's income is based on the people, who's going to generate the money to pay the UBI? I just don't. I mean, I like to say, instead of saying the government, just say the taxpayer. So the taxpayer has to pay UBI, but if there aren't enough taxpayers, who's going to be paying for the UBI? It's not going to be Google and Facebook. They're too wealthy. They're offshore. They're going to, they don't pay taxes. So UBI is not realistic. So if you add a D to it, though, universal basic data income, that gets to my earlier statement, which is I truly believe people should be fairly compensated for the use of their data. Now, it's $1 trillion industry out there, so there's a lot of money to be divvied up and sent back to people, and I'd rather it go back to you and me and everybody else whose data is being used than to Mark Zuckerberg and Eric Schmidt.
Interesting. So what role does blockchain play in the ImagineBC solution?
Well, it's critical, to be quite honest. I only started ImagineBC after I'd gone 180 on blockchain. At first, I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever seen. And then when I really got to understand what it was, I thought it was a game-changing technology. So our value proposition says that ImagineBC is here to help the individual monetize their personal information. In doing so, we keep you anonymous so you don't lose value in that information. The only way you can keep an individual anonymous, which means even ImagineBC doesn't know who you are, is to have your data in a secure distributed network, which is blockchain. And when ImagineBC identifies opportunities, we put them in front of you and you make the decision you want to participate or not. If you do, then you release your data from your wallet. So there you see, you're in control of every decision being made. So rather than your data being gobbled up and all of a sudden ads coming up on your phone through text messages, which is unbelievably annoying, here, the ads are all in a place called our application. You browse through them, decide which ones you want to partake in because the value for you to partake in it is there. And if you do, you get compensated for doing that. So without blockchain, you couldn't secure the data properly. We'd just be a big target like everybody else.
Give me a little more understanding of how the marketplace actually works.
So we're based on the concept that there's always a buyer and a seller of something. So in the case of me being compensated for the use of my personal data related to advertising, I'm actually the seller. The individual is the seller. The advertiser is the buyer because they're buying your data and your time for you to consume their ad. So today, as an advertiser, I might have a budget of $15,000, which I go onto Facebook and I pay by impressions, and I really have no idea if I have an ROI from that or not. It's just not there. In our world, if I have a $15,000 budget, I get to say, I want to target my ad at these type of people. I'm willing to pay X per view of my ad when one of those people watches my ad. And then we put that in front of the members of our community who match those parameters. And if that person watches the ad to completion, they will be paid that X. Or actually, they're paid 70% of that X. And the other 30% gets distributed to other members of our community, including us. We take 10% of that transaction.
And I was on your site, and it highlighted some research from Radical Exchange about the value of an individual's personal data. Well, how much is it worth annually? And again, is that a real number?
Nobody's got a real number on it yet, but there is a range, right? The high end of the range is probably right now about $20,000 a year. I think as 5G technology rolls out more and more data becomes available about people, that number could actually inch higher. At the low end, you've actually seen the government talk about potentially taxing big tech so that like a $25 a month stipend can be paid to everybody for their use of their data. That's really low, right? $25 a month, so that's what, $300 a year? No. So, I look at this all the time. I research it all the time. I roughly think all your personal data. Now, that doesn't mean ImagineBC alone. It means many different types of companies like ImagineBC helping people monetize their data in different areas. But if you lump them all together, I think it's legitimately probably $8,000 to $10,000 a year. And here's a good example of that, because people don't understand value of data, but here's a good example. 23andMe, right, collects your genetic information. God knows why. I don't know why anybody would give their genetic information to anybody, but to find, in my case, I give them my genetic information, they find out I'm Eastern European. I don't need to pay for that. So, but people did, and then 23andMe turned around and in a one-time, non-exclusive transaction, sold all that data to GlaxoSmithKline for $400 million. So when that transaction was done, I looked up how many users that, people had paid 23andMe for a test. And when I did the math, that turned out to be $1,000 per person. Now that one transaction in our model would have netted you $700. You tell me any American who wouldn't like an extra $700 in their pocket. That's one transaction. So what is somebody's data worth? Way more than $300 a year. So that's why I right now put it at about probably 8,000 to 10,000, and I really think it'll get up into the 20s.
And so bring us up to date. So how much traction, what traction have you garnered to date with the company?
Well, we like any startup and certainly in this world, we've struggled. We've got 6,000 current members in the community, which is nothing to shout home about. But we've got a number, interestingly enough, rather than banging our head against the wall here in the United States, we found two excellent opportunities internationally where they get this concept a lot better than they do here in the United States. So we've got one brewing in South Africa, and we've got another brewing out of the UK. And those opportunities should yield us millions of users by the end of the year. Now, I can give you a sense. So the South Africa, the value proposition there is, now think about the South African population. 80% of it is nearly destitute. They're not a wealthy country. And in fact, this is a South African mobile smartphone that I actually bought when I was over there. So they pay for their time not by a monthly contract like we do. They pay for their time by the minute. So the value proposition for us in our app will be on every one of these devices sold by the largest retailer in South Africa. And every time somebody watches an ad on our app on this device, they will earn more airtime. So think about that. I don't have to go into my wallet to get more airtime. And airtime in South Africa is like an opioid here in the United States. I can't get enough of it. So there's a value proposition. I'm not spending money. I'm spending 1 to 2 minutes a day to consume ads that make sense to me. And in return for consuming those ads, I'm getting something I really want, a lot more airtime.
Tell us about the other key members of your team.
Our partners, obviously, our international partners are huge right now. We've got, here in the States, we've got a fellow by the name of Nenad Dordovic, who had actually opened these opportunities for us in the UK and South Africa. Our team over in South Africa are two fellows by the name of Paul Ginsberg and Dries Olofsson, who have been just unbelievably helpful. Especially imagine during a pandemic, we couldn't be flying across the ocean all the time. In fact, we got back from South Africa just as Omicron hit there. We got out of the country just as Omicron hit. But they've been hugely helpful to us on the ground. Those are the key players for us right now. And also Andrew Farrier, who's a new addition to our board of directors, has really been helping us on the marketing side, getting our marketing strategy straight, how to take advantage of these opportunities back here in the States.
So ImagineBC has a number of partnerships, including one of our friends, the Cal Ripken Senior Foundation. So can you tell us you can talk about the Cal Ripken Foundation partnership or some of your other partnerships?
Sure. I mean, some of the others are Toys for Tots, National Network to End Domestic Violence, World Central Kitchen. It's interesting. When we look for a nonprofit partner, we look for somebody where there's no question, there's no partisanship, which is not so easy these days. But I don't think anybody would deny that a child should have a toy at Christmas or a gift at Christmas. I don't think anybody would deny that somebody deserves a hot meal. What Cal Ripken Senior Foundation is doing regarding education in inner cities, that's a fabulous message. Nobody's going to deny that. I don't care if you're left or you're right. So those are the type of partners we look for. Now, the partnership works this way in that in our model, remember I said that if somebody consumes an ad, they receive 70% of the value of that ad that the advertiser put in. Well, 10% of that goes into what we call our donation pool, and that pool is then split up amongst those partners. So 10 cents of every dollar invested by advertisers goes back out to these social causes. Also, a very ethical use of advertising dollars. So now we've just sent 80%, 80%, 70 used to go back to the very eyes you're trying to reach, and 10% going out to these marvelous nonprofit foundations. I think that's, again, a much better use of the money than going into Mark Zuckerberg's pocket.
And so how's ImagineBC been funded to date, and are there any plans for Series A in the near future?
We totally self-funded. As I said, we use the profit of that good old HR payroll company to fund it to date. Yes, we do have plans. We'll probably go out aggressively after we've launched. We're not your typical startup in that, first of all, I'm 60 years old. I'm not trying to change the world. I have a different look at the world. I'm just trying to help save it. And also, we want to prove that our model works, actually produces revenue, and even more importantly, and dramatically, is profitable. So I come from a world where you used to not be able to go public until you were profitable. Amazon changed all that, but I'm still old school. When we show the model is viable, which we should be able to do this year, we probably, to accelerate growth, which is the natural use of capital.
And so what are the growth plans for ImagineBC?
Certainly, we want to leverage those opportunities in South Africa and UK. And in fact, we're already in discussions in Nigeria to reproduce the model we've got going on in South Africa. We've just entered into discussions in Ethiopia to look at that model. So right now we're kind of focused on English-speaking regions of the world, but in general, we'll have to, we can take this out anywhere, and we're looking for the low income where the value proposition is awesome. Right? It gets me something of value, whether it be airtime or something else. Here in the United States, can you imagine if let's say Walmart ran this out, and instead of purchasing airtime, what if it would purchase your Walmart Plus? That's $15 a month. Well, your typical Walmart purchaser probably would prefer not to spend the $15 a month to get the reduced prices from Walmart. Here, watch a couple ads a day, and you earn you $15 a month. So any place where that model works, that's where we're going to go.
So is there any part of your story or the ImagineBC story that you haven't shared with us that you'd like to share with us?
Not really. Well, the only other part would be we really haven't focused on the content side of it. We've talked a lot about the advertising side, but ultimately, as I said, we hope on the content side that people will take some of that money and share it for valuable content. Now, again, I'm not a big believer in the YouTube business model. The thought of giving one's intellectual property away for nothing is just foreign to me, because I was a businessman before Google existed. So giving something of value away for nothing in hopes that the person I give it to will decide how much I'm worth, that's bizarre to me. And in fact, it's not sustainable in a world where jobs will be disappearing. So intellectual property and time become more and more valuable when I can't drive a truck or I can't work and clean a room anymore because robots have replaced us all. So the content side of our strategy is, we're not trying to compete with Prime or with Netflix. We're interested in content that is inspirational, informational, or educational. So not necessarily the movie, but maybe the backstory of the movie. But right, and in fact, we do hope to put out our own news service, right? Something that is actually balanced, because we won't be advertiser dependent. Remember, as I said at the very beginning, member funded. So it's our responsibility to offer our membership accurate, trustworthy news. So that's a big plan for us, and we hope to be able to get that launched probably back into this year.
Well, Erik, I want to thank you for sharing your story, and we look forward to hearing your progress as you navigate through the digital journey that you're about to head on.
Thanks. We hopefully will be launching in South Africa first week in April. So launch is not too far away.